Hey, folks, good evening and welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio, where the veil between the known and the unknown is lifted one story at a time. I welcome you and all listeners to the channel, as well as first timers in the chat. I hope that you find tonight's subject and reports interesting. Now, tonight, we turn our attention to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a land steeped in rich history, rolling forest, ancient mountains, and a long legacy of inexplicable encounters. From the shadowy hollows of the Appalachian spine to the mist-laden valleys of the Susquehanna, Pennsylvania pulses with strange energy. This is a state where the past never truly dies, and something else watches from the tree line. Now, for decades, eyewitnesses have come forward with chilling tales of upright canines stalking wooded backroads, winged humanoids gliding silently over towns, and elusive primate-like creatures, which many call Bigfoot, haunting the dense woodlands. These cryptids have become woven into the folklore and fear of the region. Yet their presence remains as real as the trembling voice of a witness who knows what they saw. But the strangest doesn't end there. Pennsylvania is also home to some of the most notorious hauntings on record, from restless spirits in colonial graveyards to malevolent forces lurking in old mining towns and forgotten asylums. The line between myth and the memory blurs when homes become battlefields for the paranormal, and entire communities are affected by a presence they cannot name, let alone explain. Then there are the skies, glowing orbs, structured craft, and unearthly lights that confound radar and reason alike. Reports of UFOs, alien encounters are frequent. An example is the Kecksburg incident, where a fiery object once fell from the heavens and was quickly cloaked in secrecy. For many Pennsylvanians, the extraterrestrial is not just science fiction, it's part of their lived experience. As we delve into these accounts tonight, we invite you to listen closely, not just with your ears, but with your instincts. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or someone who has had their own unexplained experience, Phantoms and Monsters Radio brings you into the fold. Because here in Pennsylvania, the strange is not a rarity. It's a constant whisper in the dark. But before I go any further, I want to mention that this channel is made possible by clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by sharing our programming. If you're watching us on YouTube, Super Chat and Super Thanks donations are much appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. Other donation links are also shown in the description, so thanks for your consideration. Your comments are always welcome. Tell me which accounts you find interesting in the presentation or suggestions for upcoming shows. I want to thank our chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, and Mike, as well as thanking Kevin and Mary at ESP. Now, if you're in the chat and have a question, please use all caps, and I'll try to get to each one after the presentation. Now, this first witness report, the witness states, I was about 10 years old, and it was my first year living in rural Pennsylvania. My family and I were playing in the woods behind her house. My friend and I were playing in the woods behind her house. We were pretty deep into the forest, exploring and playing pretend near a small creek. I'll never forget when out of nowhere we began to hear a woman's melodic voice singing in the woods. It didn't seem to be coming from any one direction, and it was quite at first slowly creeping up to this very loud, haunting song ringing through the trees, filling every inch of the woods. We looked at one another, terrified, and started to run as fast as we could out of the forest and back to her house. The best thing that I can think of is to compare it to the song from Sleeping Beauty that plays in the background as Maleficent leads Aurora to the spindle. There were no words to the singing we heard. It was a high-pitched melodic sound. It was an incredibly beautiful voice, but something about the tone and melody chilled me to the core. I don't know for sure who or what was the source of this voice, but I'm certain it was not of this world. A high-pitched, beautiful, haunting, and incredibly horrifying female singing voice rang through the trees and seemed to fill the forest. It wasn't words or any kind of language, more like a melody it's hard to explain. It just felt fey-like. It's so hard to explain, but why, but it was so otherworldly, beautiful, but terrifying. I believe in fairies, 100%, but take great care not to offend them. I think some want to help humanity become better caretakers of the earth, while some hate us for the damage we've done, while others are ambivalent. Now, in this next account, the witness states, since the beginning of the pandemic to now, I've been working as a travel paramedic across the country. I've worked everywhere from New York City to LA and Native American reservations in South Dakota. During my travels, I've seen some eerie things and have had strange encounters. A lot of the high strangest occurred in Pennsylvania, of all places. Pennsylvania was my first travel job during the pandemic. Typically, I was in a new city in a new hotel every week. I've been all over the state, typically driving 100 to 300 miles a day through winding mountain roads. Pennsylvania can be a strange place at night, especially with the lack of street lighting on many roads. On one occasion, while driving down a back road through central Pennsylvania, a giant dog hopped the guardrail and ran in front of my truck. It looked like a husky or coyote, but bigger than any dog or coyote could ever be. On all fours, its head was on the hood of my trunk. On all fours, its head was as high as the hood of my truck. A 2020 Dodge 2500, the hood of the truck is 6 feet from the ground. It made prolonged eye contact with me with sharp, piercing yellow eyes as it crossed the road and continued into the woods. Now, flash forward a few months. I'm in the Philadelphia area. The area my hotel occupied is newly developed, so the parking lot of the hotel was well lit, but the surrounding area is wooded and dark. I'm often awake until early morning hours and keep my blinds open. The other night, I was looking out the window and saw an odd white shape in the parking lot. It was featureless from what I could tell, kind of like a blob with thick, short legs. I was so shocked I did a double take, and then it was gone. A few nights later, I was lying in bed watching TV. Window open, blinds up. I heard this odd noise. The only way I can describe it is sounding like a baby's cry, but muffled and raspy. And it sounded like it was being carried away as if the strong gust of wind was blowing it out of earshot. But I've never heard a sound like that. I thought maybe a fox or some other kind of animal, but it was way too close to human and just not human enough to be written off as such. Could this have possibly been a crawler? Well, it could have been, but then again, his description in Pennsylvania isn't anything new that I haven't been told before and have experienced before. In February, this next witness states, in February 2019, we had an unseasonably warm week, so I decided to head to the mountains in central Pennsylvania one night after work for a short backpacking trip. This was near Bald Eagle State Forest. I left my car right outside the town, basically just a tavern and a general store, near the trailhead sometime after 8 p.m. and started to climb up from the creek toward the higher elevations. Most of the snow had melted off over the previous days, leaving the streams overflowing and sections of trail covered with running or standing water. With rhododendron bushes growing all around, there was often no choice but to slosh straight through the water. There's no chance of keeping your feet dry in conditions like that anyway, so you just stick to the center of the trail and accept it. Now, the trail took me up into the fog, which continued to thicken with elevation until my entire world was reduced to a 6-foot bubble lit by my headlamp. The air somehow felt warm and cool at the same time. There was a constant white noise rushing sound from the water all around that grew and faded as I walked. And the whole sensory experience had some weird effects on me. Water in my peripheral vision looked like it was writhing instead of flowing. And I had these near constant sense of light and activity just behind and to the sides of me. No unusual dread or anything like that, just a bizarre feeling as my mind invented things to fill in the surroundings that were mostly blocked off by my senses. I pitched the tarp and went to sleep near one of those roaring streams sometime around 1 a.m. I don't even know how many times I woke up convinced there were a crowd of people murmuring. I opened my eyes and peeked out the tarp. No more than 30 feet away were a pair of bright yellow eyes looking in my direction. Then I heard a human-like voice. As I watched the yellow eyes move through the bushes, I realized it was at least 8 foot in height. I ducked back under the tarp and listened carefully. I heard several voices that seemed to be having a conversation for another 10 minutes or so, and then it eventually stopped. Now, previous to that night, I've never believed in the Bigfoot existence theories, but I now feel that is what I encountered. This next witness states, "Hi, Lon. I grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, near Ephrata, where many Amish people live. A few years ago, late in the summer, I was taking my mom's dog for a walk. There was a road behind her development that sloped downhill with a lot of fields that eventually turned into barns and houses that bent into the wooded area. My mom worked the second shift, and I felt bad for the dog being cooped up in the house, so I decided to take the pup for a long walk and some exercise. As I started walking down the hill, a cat came out from behind a house, then another, then more, from fields and houses until I was being followed down this road by no less than a dozen cats. The dog was still relatively calm, which was weird for her because she usually spent the nights running in circles around my mom's modular home, jumping over people and couches to make sure she still could run in a perfect circle. I kept going down this road, which stretched out for probably a mile in front of me before bending into trees. The sun was beginning to go down, and that's when I started hearing yelling. At first, I thought it was Amish folks just bringing in livestock for the evening. But then I heard a pattern, or noticed a pattern, and it evolved into this weird, indescribable chanting and singing. Someone had a drum. I started slowing down, and I heard dogs barking from all over the place. Then a few people opened the front doors to their homes and were just staring at me. I got out of there and ran the whole way up that hill with the dog, cat still following until we got to the main road. Never went that way for a walk again. I know that you're familiar with the Amish since you have stated that your early family was part of that community. Have you heard of anything bizarre like that, and have you ever experienced it? Now, some folks who live outside of the sect, the Amish sect, claim that there are Amish members who practice a form of magic and occultism. Folk healing among many of the Pennsylvania Dutch and older Mennonite communities, they call it powwow. Well, and I've talked about this before, and it's still practiced. And there are claims that it involves supernatural and mystic qualities. Now, as far as what this witnessed experience, there could be another explanation since I have experienced some of that myself. Drumming and chanting phenomena is not an unknown manifestation of the south central region of Pennsylvania. I attribute much of it to the lingering sentinel energy of the past residents, in particular the Susquehanna and other previous native tribes who habituated or inhabited the area. I have mentioned my experience in some of my writings. So in this next account, the witness states, I am writing this report for my girlfriend as she is nervous about wanting to tell her story. This event took place towards the end of October 2010 in a duplex in the woods of Troy Hill, Pennsylvania. My girlfriend recounts this as a dream, but the way she tells it and remembers it is so vividly, it scares me, and I believe that it could have happened. She has never had any odd experiences in her life, so for her to have this dream seems strange. I have, however, seen my fair share of strange things in the sky and fully believe in aliens and all that. I convinced her to let me tell this event as it may have happened, and I would like you guys to check it out. We are willing to discuss the event further and answer any questions you may have. So here it is. I'm typing this as she speaks it from here on out. She said, I remember it being very early in the morning, and I woke up to 5 and 6 beings in the room. There was a little one standing in the front of my closet, 2 tall ones, one standing on each side of the little one, and one to the left by the base of the bed, and 1 or 2 standing off to the right of our bed. The little one was staring at me, not making any sounds or gestures, but by the way he was, I guessed that he might have been their leader. As he was looking at me, the tall one started moving around the room. At this point, I tried to get up, but I couldn't move any portion of my body, and I couldn't even scream or do anything. We were sleeping on an air mattress, so we were only a foot off the floor. Now, one of them came over and got behind my head and peered over me, looking down at me, and then he walked away. Then he and one of the 2 of the other beings went over to where my boyfriend was sleeping. At this point, a bright, shiny light came through the window and was shining on the floor of the room, lighting up the entire room. As it got brighter, the little one and 2 of the walls moved towards the window and the light, and I could see them. I couldn't see them anymore. I lost sight of them. The rest of the remaining beings all converged on the light and window, and as they were getting close to the window, my boyfriend's body started to levitate, lifting into the air. Now, at this time, I'm not worrying about the beings as I'm focusing on my boyfriend elevating into the air. I regain the ability to move, and I start screaming and crying, and I jump onto my boyfriend's body. I remember the impact of my landing on him lured him out of the air a little bit, but he continued to rise. I was still screaming, and I lost sight of the rest of the beings. It gets super bright, and then all I remember of the event until I wake up the next morning next to my boyfriend and unusually late. I remember waking up sweating and feeling very frightened, and it was around noon. I felt like I woke up later than I usually did, and I was very groggy. My boyfriend also felt like he had slept for way longer than he did and felt like we had both lost time. He had no memory of this, and as he stayed asleep the whole time during the event. Now she told me about this dream, and that's when I told her about my experiences with seeing things in the sky. Now, what scares me is that she can describe this story with amazing detail and vividly remembers their face and everything. We were living with her mom and stepdad at the time, and they were in the room next to us. Now, this next witness states, we're talking about fall of 2021. My brother-in-law and I were beneath a railroad trestle in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. It was nighttime. We were out early in the morning on the first day of firearm deer hunting season. I didn't notice it right at first, but this V-shaped boomerang thing zipped up almost over our heads. I'm talking like 500 feet or so. This thing was big, like a city block. It was more like a boomerang. There was a white light on either end, which kind of reminded me of an observatory kind of thing, like one of those helicopters with a double rotor, but it was humongous. Right at the bottom of the boomerang, I guess you could say it was kind of like a strobing blue light. My brother-in-law was with me. He saw the same thing. At the time, it was, just time just stopped. And when you're looking at something like this, it was probably 500 feet over our heads. Then it just sat there for a little bit. The thing was huge. This probably lasted maybe 2 minutes. We didn't think that much about it or, about anything. And when it left, it made this hissing noise, or what I could hear was a hissing noise. I didn't see it come up on us over our heads, and like I said, it moved away very fast. This thing was like a blink of an eye. It was over my head, and then it was gone over Pennsylvania. I mean, you could see it move away. That's what I remember. As I said, it was the fall of 2021 for a craft, and that's what I'm looking at. I know I was looking at a craft of that size. I'm telling you, it was huge. 4 stories to either end. At the time, I was not scared about it. It was just like, what in the world's that? I did think about running and hiding. I didn't think about anything. I had a gun with me. We were deer hunting at the time. I didn't think about shooting at it. It was just like time kind of stopped. Now, this next account is a tale of the Northumberland werewolf. It was believed by the local people that an old hermit was a shape-shifting werewolf after he was shot one night. So the following tale has been around for over a century and a half, but I think it's kind of updated a little bit over years. I've heard several versions of this. Now, the area around Northumberland, Pennsylvania has had its share of strange encounters and incidents over the years. In particular, the Todd C's possible UFO abduction and subsequent death case, which Butch Witkowski and I both investigated. But there's also an older story from the mid-1800s that involves a possible werewolf. Now, the early German farming communities throughout Pennsylvania were plagued by wolf attacks on their livestock. Young May Paul lived in a modest farm with her reserved family from Northumberland, Pennsylvania. Now, May's significant responsibilities on the farm including herding and tending to the family's sheep. The young lady was well liked throughout the tiny community. It was no trouble making friends. However, she quietly caught the attention of an elder gentleman who everyone was fearful of. He would often be seen following the young lady around town, as well as watching her from afar as she tended to the flocks. Their kinship seemed strange and disturbing to many individuals, though they never seemed to cross any boundaries. Now, a strange occurrence began to occur on surrounding farms, and the Paul family seemed to stay safe. Wolf attacks on the surrounding sheep herds were becoming commonplace, and onslaughts were being reported in broad daylight. Yet, the Paul family stayed safe from any encounters and didn't suffer one casualty. Now, due to the recent attacks on the docile creatures, bounties were being paid out to hunters who could produce corpses. So one evening, a nearby neighbor spotted the glowing eyes of a wolf being lit by the full moon. The man quickly retrieved his rifle and let off a fiery blast. The yelping cries from the wolf echoed for acres. Feeling content that the predator was now taken care of, the man retired for the evening. The following day, early dawn, the man trudged through his land until he found a trail of blood. Through the thicker trees, he followed the crimson trail until he came upon the body of an elderly gentleman. The man lay dead from a single gunshot wound to the abdomen. When the community got wind of what happened, locals immediately branded the hermit a werewolf. Hadn't he always been strange and secretive, living alone and keeping to himself? They buried his body in the dirt floor of his cabin and christened the spot the Wolfman Grube, which translates to mean the Wolfman's grave. Now, strangely enough, Maypole never lost a single sheep to a wolf attack, even though quite often a large gray wolf would be seen menacingly around the perimeters of her property, staring ominously at the woman from afar. Now, this next witness states, this is probably useless information, but when I was a kid in the 70s, I told people what I saw, and they said I was dreaming. I grew up on a farm outside of Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Some beings came into my bedroom and stood on the porch roof outside my bedroom at night. I would cry, "Please stop." They were about 3 feet tall, humanoid, and upright. My dad told me that they were stray cats, but they weren't cats. I wasn't allowed to watch TV for a long time because my parents thought the television shows were giving me bad dreams. Now, the closest neighbor was about 200 yards away and asked me why my night light was so bright. I only had a little Christmas tree light. She said it was so bright she was concerned that the house might be on fire, but she could tell it wasn't fire, just a bright light. Now, I was born in 1970, and we moved out of that house in 1979. I never saw them again, but I know what I remember. I've been trying to tell myself they were just dreams for like 35 years, and I know it wasn't dreams. Like I said, useless information after 35 years, but it feels good to tell someone who won't say you were dreaming. And the neighbor who asked about the super bright light wasn't dreaming either. So thank you. That's kind of a strange inquiry, but I figured I'd throw it in here. So this next account, the witness states, and a lot of these accounts come from central Pennsylvania or south central Pennsylvania, where I'm located. So I'm just making you aware of that. So, hi, I got lost in central Pennsylvania one night and tried to turn around. The road I was on didn't have any roads I could turn on. The places where I could fit were closed and gated off. The road ahead had no truck sign, so I stopped on the shoulder enough that the other traffic could fit through. I tried asking my coworker for help, and she told me I'd have to do it alone. I hated her. She was no help and had to do it, and I had to do everything. So I'm looking for a place to turn around. GPS and phone couldn't find any signal. When up in front of me, truck lights flickered on. I was pretty sure there wasn't a truck there a second ago. Then an Asian man walked up to me from the truck and asked if I was lost, to which I said yes. He told me that he had a key to a school bus yard behind his truck, and he had me turn in to get her turned around. It was full of old buses and wasn't on Google Maps, even in the satellite mode. I was sitting behind his truck when he asked where I was headed, and I told him that, and he knew where my load was coming from, California. I was headed to the Walmart distribution center, and we were late, so I thought maybe he worked there and he knew maybe we were the only late load, but he didn't have a Walmart truck or trailer. I shrugged it off, and he says to follow him there. And everything is fine for a while, gets me up and onto I-81, and we take up on this hill. He takes off, and I see his neon orange trailer up ahead cresting the hill. I get up to the top, and he's gone. It's a strange rise ahead, a straight rise ahead, and I don't see him anywhere. So I start freaking out. No way he sped off that fast in a semi, and I couldn't find the exit I need. I see Flying J truck stop, if you don't know, and stop. I run inside and get something to eat, donuts and Gatorade, and go to the counter. A trucker's atlas is sitting there as I'm checking out. I decide I need it since I'm lost. He rings up the donuts, rings up the drink, gets their atlas, and it doesn't scan. The cashier tries again, and another cancel sound as before. So he just hands it to me and says, another trucker must have just left it there. I don't even think we stock it, to be honest. Just take it. I return to the truck, scarf down the donuts, and open the atlas. I find out where I am, and I plot the rest of my trip. My GPS flickered back to life when I started the engine. I don't believe in ghosts, but that made me wonder. Now, look, when I said California, I meant California, Pennsylvania. There is a California, Pennsylvania, and I found out there was a Walmart distribution center there. Excuse me. So this next witness states, when I was a teenager, we went away for a week of camping at the Hidden Valley Scout Reservation in Perry County, Pennsylvania. I used to go there as well when I was in Scouts. My dad was our scoutmaster, and we were mostly all friends from growing up. There was one kid, Alex, the youngest, that we didn't know well. Was definitely kind of weird, withdrawn, and awkward, just kind of different, but still a sweet guy that everyone liked. Now, toward the end of the week, we went out on an overnight, just the scouts without my dad or his buddy, who was our other scouter. We hiked for hours into the bush. It was a hot day, and my older brother was leading us, but not drinking any water and wearing a light jacket, which made him extra hot. Eventually, we found a sweet spot next to the river. We made a fire, cooked dinner, and we soon fell asleep under the stars. Now, around 4:30 a.m., just before sunrise, my friend Steve woke me up and asked if I knew where Alex was. I said no, and that maybe he went to relieve himself, but after 5 minutes, he wasn't back, so we got up and started looking around and calling his name. Nothing. So we ranged a little further, and then I saw his sleeping bag at the end of the river, or at the edge of the river. I freaked out and ran over to see if I could see anything at the bottom, but I saw nothing. We tried to get my brother up, but he was pretty sick from the heat, and so I took charge of the situation. We started ranging into the woods and calling his name. One of the guys started doing the emergency whistle call, 3 short whistles, but we were really in the middle of nowhere. I started going deeper into the woods calling his name. Then I thought I heard something. I stopped and listened and heard a faint cry deep in the woods. So I started running, crashing through thick undergrowth, getting lashed in the face with branches, and stumbling across fallen logs. His cries got louder, and eventually I arrived at this huge clearing in the woods to find him sitting on a fallen tree in his underwear and a t-shirt. He said he had been there for hours, having woken up on the ground in the dark and having no idea where he was, so he just sat there waiting for the dawn. It was spooky. The craziest thing was that his watch had been reset, so he didn't know what time it really was. We all accepted that was probably sleepwalking, but he wasn't so far in the woods and didn't have a scratch on him. And this clearing was so bizarre because it was big and round in the middle of this dense forest. To this day, I wonder what had happened. And one thing I've got to ask is, was he taken? Was he taken by some other worldly being or a creature of some types? Who knows? So, folks, that's the end of it. If you got any questions, please put them in all caps, and we'll see what we can do about answering them. I had somebody when I posted that story originally, that last one. Somebody had asked me, "Well, it was it was scout troops. And you had a leader. Why weren't the leaders along with him? The adults with them?" Well, I thought the same thing, but I remember my days in scouting, and because I was an Eagle Scout, and we had a couple Eagle Scouts with us. Now I don't know if his brother was an Eagle Scout, but we also had explorers as well, which was above that. So many times when we stayed at a campsite for like a week or went out, we the older guys usually took over. So I don't know if that was the case or not, but I just thought I'd mention it. Yeah, Mortal Clown, thanks for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Sir Wolf, hi Lon. Did all the same cryptids exist prior to the white man in USA, or did they bring them through beliefs and practices, etc. somewhere? Yeah, that's a pretty interesting question. I think they've been here. I think they've been here for I don't know if they're indigenous, but I think they kind of pop in and out and have for eons. The whole werewolf thing, cryptid canine thing, Tueo, or what they call them around here. I think a lot of those were from the German farmers who, when they were living in the old world, they were very familiar with the werewolf lore and the wolf lore and such, the lycanthropy, and could their minds have literally not only thought form manifestations, but it's something that they thought they saw, or who knows? But yeah, I think they've been around here for for a long time. Jose Sanchez, I once visited Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Any cryptid sightings reported in an area, or is it usually in the other part of Pennsylvania that they're seen? No, just northeast of Philadelphia, up in Bucks County, we've had a lot of cryptid sightings up there, and it's a pretty affluent county as well. In fact, I think it's probably the most affluent county in the state. But we have investigated at least 4 or 5 cryptid canine sightings in Bucks County over the past 5 or 6 years. So there have been a lot of weird things in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Now, as far as things going on in Philadelphia, well, Philadelphia is an older city. I mean, for, U.S. time, there are a lot of hauntings in Philadelphia. There are a lot of stories about, of course, the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and everything in between. There's a lot of tales that have been told, and a lot of things have manifested. So, yeah, but no, Pennsylvania, all in all, is pretty creepy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in this state. I'm kind of surprised some of the things that do turn up and that are reported to me. Dagnammit, how many sheep squatch do you think are out there? There's one roaming around out in Breckenridge County, Kentucky for a long time, since Daniel Boone times. I don't get many sheep squatch reports. Now, the only one I've ever gotten, I did get one in Kentucky years ago, not far from Louisville, that the witness says that was a sheep squatch. I had another one that was reported to me in South Central Virginia, near Blacksburg, many, many years ago. But I believe those are the only two. Now, I've had people, I don't know if people are familiar with the Ozark howler. It's supposed to be a big cat or some kind of cryptid. Some people believe that's a sheep squatch. I don't really know. But other than that, that's all I have received. Berg Fruling. Can you do a show about about out of place animals, just normal animals and no cryptids? Well, I have done the not deer shows. I've done that before, and I've done similar shows. I mean, if they're if they're out of place animals, they're basically a cryptid. It's something that it's not known to science. I mean, now, are you talking about animals that are not known to inhabit the specific area? Yeah, I probably do that, but that wouldn't be very paranormal. But I'll keep note of it. Jose Sanchez, was your story about the yellow eyes at the height of the truck's front bumper have been a dog man? 6 to 7 foot puts them in that general category. I have received reports of cryptid canines that have been seen in front of vehicles and trucks and stuff that didn't measure up that high. In fact, I had a couple of them described to me from Alabama. We've been doing some investigating out of Alabama. In fact, and Mortal Clown, who's in the chat, I sent her the audio from something that our investigators grabbed down there. We don't know what it is. I think one was a cryptid canine, the other was a Bigfoot. And I've talked before about the encounters we've had in central Alabama around the Coosa River Wildlife Management Area. That's kind of sits right between Montgomery and Birmingham. But there's a lot going on there. And, we've gathered evidence for years. Eventually, one day I'll put it all together and do a presentation. But until I get some more information and some more evidence, I'm just going to have to hold off on that. Jose Sanchez, I once encountered something that looked like a fox but with extremely long legs, and it was just standing there staring at me. This happened before going to work at 4 a.m. What could that have been? I don't know what area you live at. Around here, if I saw something like that, I'd probably believe is a coy wolf. Now, we have been seeing coy wolves more or less around here. They're a crossbreed between a coyote and a timber wolf. They originated up in Canada, but they've been moving down into Pennsylvania, and they look like that. They look like a coyote with very long legs. So I don't know what you saw, but that's the only thing I could think of at this time. Okay, folks. Well, I want to thank each and all of you for watching and chatting. If you donated, it's truly appreciated. Your support is what makes all this possible. Please like, subscribe, and also share. And if you have a sighting or encounter report that you would like to be considered for the Personal Report Show or post on Phantoms and Monsters, feel free to forward to me at my email at lonstrickler@phantomsandmonsters.com. So until we meet again, stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend. And good night.